Missouri Aquarium Society, and welcome to the Know Your Speaker series. We've got Dr. Eric Thomas coming in. He's going to join us in just a second. Before we begin with him, I've got a couple of announcements to do. So our first announcement is that we have Dr. Eric Thomas giving our webinar. He is going to be talking about Cory suicide and the Corydoras toxin in particular that they release. I am very excited to talk about that. We have also the cancellation of the November public auction. We also have the November webinar that is coming up. So the November auction is canceled, but the November webinar with Andrew, I'm so sorry, Andrew Pierkowski, I think I nailed that actually, is going to be presenting on Gadiads. So we've got two awesome talks. And I'm back. Sorry about that, everybody. I accidentally killed my own stream. All right, so Andrew Pierkowski is talking about Gadiads, and without any further ado, we are going to welcome in our speaker. We have Dr. Eric Thomas. Dr. Eric Thomas is a professor in Stockton, California, where his research is split between studying mating pheromones in frogs and self-defense toxins in Corydoras catfish. On the hobby side, his interests lie in breeding catfish, primarily Corydoras and loricarids. Those are the lip-brooding catfish. He keeps over 40 species in 24 aquaria, operates a YouTube channel and a Facebook page, is a moderator on the Planet Catfish, and is a program coordinator for the Sacramento Aquarium Society. Eric, welcome to the stream.
Hi there.
Hey.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So, Eric,
yes.
Tell us, how did you get started in the hobby?
Well, when I was a little kid, my brother and I, we kept Malawi cichlids, and okay. We also kept Geophagus.
How old were you guys?
I was 8 or 10,
okay.
And he was 2 years older. I think I was 8 when we started, maybe.
Okay, you guys
maybe
were
7.
Nice.
So we were little.
Yeah.
And we started breeding those and Geophagus and Steatocranus. But all cichlids when we were little. Sure. And then I went away to college, had to get rid of my aquariums, and then didn't have fish again until my children started keeping them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they would just have guppies. One of my kids did a science fair project on density in guppies, and they felt so bad because they grew all these guppies in one tank and all the guppies died, which is exactly what you expect to happen. And they were crying about it. Well, that's life. But it got a tank into the house, and some other kid in the family said, I want some fish. And eventually we got some Corys. And then one day they bred in the tank. And I thought, who breeds catfishes? You know, nobody breeds catfishes. Who wants to breed catfishes? It's boring. Yeah. But they did. And then I started getting more Corys, and then I started getting plecos, and it just kind of took off. That was in 2012, kind of going forward. So
okay, so there was a pretty big gap in
your
hobby then.
Yeah, basically 1976 to 2012.
Wow, that's considerable. Okay.
Some of you aren't that old. I'm referring to you, but okay.
Yeah. So then you started with cichlids. Was there a reason that you deviated from it, or there's a reason that you picked those up in the first place?
So my brother and I started in cichlids because that's what we wanted. Back then, the Mbuna were kind of the cool thing to have, the mouth brooders, you know,
right?
Labidachromis or whatever. No, Labidotropheus, the ones with the overhanging
overbite.
Yeah. The overbite, yeah. But when we got back into it, when I got back into having fish in 2012, I wasn't picking the fish, my kids were. So they wanted zebra danios, peppered mollies, and albino Corys, and that's what we got.
Yeah.
I had no control over it. The first time I went out and bought a clown pleco, my kids were like, Dad, that's our tank. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to live with it.
Oh, that's funny. So how many kids do you have?
3 by birth, 1 by adoption, and 3 more by second marriage. 7.
Wow.
And the youngest turns 21 next week.
Okay,
He
so you
wants,
guys are
he
empty
wants
nesters
beer for
then?
his birthday. What's that?
You guys are empty nesters then?
Not quite. The youngest, my wife currently has one the same age, and they're
Okay.
both going back and forth between home and let's
Ah,
say an apartment. So they're not
so
quite out
you're
yet. We're getting close. Within
yeah,
a
you're
year.
part-time empty nesters.
Yeah, partly.
Okay, great. And so 7 kids you said total?
Yep.
And what's the age range on them? So 21's your youngest.
Yeah, 21 is the youngest. The oldest was born in 91. So what does that put her? 29, turning 29 this year.
Okay,
So
so your kids were actually the ones that got you back into the hobby then, huh?
yes, yeah. It was
Wow,
the
very
youngest one.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had frogs along the way, like
Yeah.
fire lily toads and things like that,
Hmm.
but hadn't kept many fish until just recently.
Huh. I've been doing a lot of like, I film the videos for this YouTube channel, so I go into people's houses and interview,
Hmm.
do tours of the fish room, do interviews, and almost exclusively people tell me that like, oh yeah, my parents kept a fish, or like the parents got me a goldfish, or.
Hmm.
But I think it's so interesting that it's kind of like the opposite, where you kind of got into it a little bit, but
Yeah.
your kids were the ones who got you kind of rehooked back into it.
Yeah, and there's I don't know what stopped me. It's more about so at the time that they did bring me back into it, I was single parenting, so I only had 4 kids, not 7 at that time, and it's kind of difficult to be a single parent with 4 kids, and the youngest at that age was
You
10
don't
years
say.
old. So I was basically working with 10 to 16-year-olds at that time. So having 4 kids, 10 to 16, not a lot of time in the hobby for a hobby at that time. So
You're
I only got
basically
back. I
you're
was a
you're just
parent.
a
Yeah,
taxi cab driver, really.
pretty much. It's
Oh
nice to
man, I just had my first kid is 11 months old, and it's a lot of fun, but it
Have you
is.
gotten them a tank yet?
Uh, Wife won't let me get a tank in his room, but I
Okay.
have plenty of tanks to give him when he's ready. So
Okay.
I've got one
Okay.
right over there for him.
Okay.
Right now, the problem is he likes to shake the tank stand.
That's not good.
Nope. That's
No,
suboptimal for sure.
no.
So once he's mature enough and old enough, he can have a fish tank in his room if he wants one. But he has a good time. I take him down to Daddy's aquarium. We've got 50, 60 tanks in the basement where I'm doing the home breeding stuff. So,
I look forward to
but
that day.
yeah, yeah, it's a good time. So let's see. How did you end up? You said, I'm not sure if you said, but I think I said that you are a professor at
Yes.
Pacific
Yeah.
University, right?
Yeah.
And
University of the Pacific. So Pacific University is actually up in Oregon. We're University of the Pacific. We're in California.
ah,
Different.
I'm sure that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Have you been in California your whole life then?
No. My parents actually had been. I was born overseas actually, and
Mhm.
they moved back to Cleveland for a couple of years, then over to Southern California to Riverside.
Hmm.
And then my parents split up, and my mom took us to Las Vegas for about 10 years. And then we moved back to Riverside to finish high school and then off to college on my own. So, and then I've been in California since then, since about
Okay,
1976.
very cool. So then you were a biology student?
Yeah. When I grew up, I ask, even now I ask my students, what do you want to be when you grow up? Why are you here?
Yeah.
And when I was that age, I wanted to either work in a zoo breeding endangered species,
Mm.
preferably fish at that time, or I would work at like a toy company like Mattel making toys or models or something like designing new models or toys. That was my career goal.
Those
And
are two very different goals.
yeah, but I was kind of dabbling in both, so it made sense. And
Yeah.
I went up to college, and there were no fish professors at my school. So I got into frogs, and I was working with a professor who collected frogs in Argentina. So we were the first to, if you've ever heard of Budget's frog, it's Lepidopetrachus laevis. We were
Okay.
the first, he and I were the first people to breed that in captivity back in 1970, I want to say 70,
I'm
70,
Googling it right now.
okay,
Does this thing
78,
look like a
right?
pancake with
78.
eyes on top?
Yep, that's pretty much it. Sometimes
All
people
right.
call them Jabba the Hutt frogs.
I
Um,
could see that.
so we
Got
bred
some
those in
wicked looking teeth on them.
1977. It was an ugly frog, mean too. One bit
Yeah.
me right through my thumbnail and drew blood with its
Yeah,
teeth.
those teeth
They're
are vicious.
nasty.
They look like little snake fangs.
Right. So I got into frogs and frog reproduction, And I thought if you worked in a zoo, you needed to have a degree in zoology, but it turns out for people who have degrees in zoology, they never actually work in zoos, they work in universities.
Hmm.
So if you were going to work in a zoo, you'd get a totally different kind of degree, like a veterinary degree or something. So I just went in the wrong direction. But I liked what I was doing. So I just
Yeah.
got deeper into the frogs and research and became a university professor.
Huh. We've got a question from Facebook user I want to get to real quick before they disappear on us. They asked, how do you keep Corydoras eggs from fuzzing over?
So I'm going to tell you the ideal answer and then the reality answer. The ideal answer is you add something to the water that inhibits fungal growth, and it could be something like methylene blue. Some people use alder cones, or they'll use leaves that release tannins, like I use oak leaves or magnolia leaves. Um, but the reality is, and the other thing you could do is if you see fungused eggs, take them out. Don't leave them in with the good eggs. Another approach that actually works pretty well is get ram's horn snails. Ram's horn snails will sort of selectively eat the bad eggs, and they don't tend to touch the good eggs. And there's actually a forum thread on Planet Catfish where some people, it's run by a guy in Canada, but lots of people have contributed, where they list all the species they've tested that with and said, yeah, it seems to be safe with this species of Cory, it's safe with that species of Cory. So that's actually one of the strategies I use too, is I add ram's horn snails to the basket that has the eggs in it. The reality is eggs are always going to fungus. I rarely have a big batch of, let's say, 60 to 100 eggs or more where I don't get a third of them fungusing.
Hmm.
So if you get the fish breeding often enough, like one Cory I was breeding Venezuelanas, which I still have, they bred every day in a row for, I think, a month and a half. It was maybe, I forget the exact number of days, but every single day I was collecting 60 to 120 eggs.
Wow.
At that point, if you lose a third or even a half of the eggs, you don't care because you're still getting hundreds and hundreds of hatchlings.
More than you know what to do with, yeah.
So, like I said,
So
there's
I
technique,
guess
but then you accept loss.
I had a question following up on that then. So is there something about how the Corydoras spawn that causes such a high fungal rate,
Well, I think that they
or
don't
is it
fertilize all
genetics?
the eggs. I think it's the unfertilized eggs that fungus.
Okay, so just
Or if
males
there's
aren't
really
high.
bad water quality, even good
Okay,
eggs could fungus.
so you think it might just be something about male Corydoras just aren't great at catching all the eggs that get laid?
It's hard to say.
Because
There
I know
are
the females are pretty sporadic. They'll like lay an egg here, and so we're lay an
right,
egg
right.
there.
Well, but so if you ever watch a Cory, what the females would do is they'll pinch the egg between their pelvic fins, and they'll
Okay.
carry it around, and then they'll shove it onto something, and kind of stick it to it. And some Corys, I have a Cory species now that does one egg at a time, and everywhere they go, they lay one egg, and I actually
Jeez.
get pretty good fertilization rates out of those. But
Okay.
when I had albino Corys, albino Aeneas, they would slop down 20 and 30 eggs at a time. And I would also get pretty good fertilization out of some of them, but not always.
Hmm.
So it could, again, I think it's water quality, I think it's fertilization. It might be the maturity of the males and females, how much practice they've had.
Yeah.
A lot of times I have my worst fails with the first few spawns.
That's it. I mean, the cichlids learn and get more efficient at it. That makes
Yeah,
sense. Corys might do it too, but I
you're
just
welcome.
wouldn't figure. Yeah, thank you. Facebook user says thank you. I just figured that Corydoras wouldn't learn quite as efficiently and effectively as a more intelligent species might, like the
I
cichlids.
don't know if it's learning or just simply getting better at sex. I think if you practice something enough, you get better at it
Fair enough.
awkwardly.
Yeah, yeah. All right. We got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, Eric,
Okay.
before I let you go here. All right, Eric. Dogs or cats?
Cats,
Ugh. All right. Better sandwich, a hot dog or a taco?
taco,
Can't believe you said
hot
cats.
dogs are nasty.
Yeah, so are
Sorry, hot
cats.
dogs are nasty. What's that?
So are cats, unless they're served up in hot dogs. All
Ew.
right. Favorite book, movie, or both?
Um, I'm going to go with the movie and say Star Wars.
Star Wars. Do you have a particular one then?
Uh, 4.
4.
which is really
The
one.
first one,
For
yeah, I
people
was gonna say
for people
4.
who care, it's really one, but it's four.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah, that's a good one. I found an incredible meme the other day that said it was Star Trek was hating on Star Wars, and he says we don't hate 6 out of our 9 movies. I was like,
I don't know. There's some
touche.
pretty bad. There's some pretty bad Star Trek movies out there.
It's true, but for some reason they don't hate them. Um, all right, so do you have a favorite nickname, Eric?
For me,
Yeah,
no. I had some nicknames in high school. They're not worth repeating. And one was actually pretty good, but that was just between me and one friend. I'll keep it to that person.
smart, smart. All right, and do you count your steps?
No,
You're not a step counter. Interesting. All right, and lastly, and most importantly, do you look after blowing your nose?
absolutely.
God, thank
Here's
you.
a question for you. Do you look after pooping?
I mean, you got to check on yourself, right?
Exactly.
It's
Same,
health.
same,
It's
same,
health.
same.
Yes. All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining us and answering the hard-hitting questions here.
You're welcome.
And guys, please tune in for Thursday. Eric is clearly a lot of fun to talk to. He's got a great sense of humor. You guys are gonna have a lot of fun. He's very knowledgeable. Um, it's gonna be a really great time, and you'll have tons of opportunity to ask Eric all sorts of questions after his presentation. And you're gonna want to stick around through the entire thing, anyways, because it's gonna be fantastic. Eric, thank you so much. Have a great
Well,
night.
I'm looking forward
And
to it. Bye,
yes, I will see
everybody.
you guys later.